I'm Jason Morrill. I'm president of the board of the Massaro Community Farm. The farm is a 57-acre piece of town-owned property. It was leased to our organization to turn it back into a farm. Historically, it was a dairy and poultry operation, but we've turned it into an organic vegetable production facility. We've got about 5 acres of production over there, and you can see we've done some work over here. There'll be more plantings going on over here. One of our big accomplishments this year, thanks to our farmer, is that we are USDA certified organic. One of the few CSAs in the state that can boast that they're organic. For those that don't know what a CSA is, it's community-supported agriculture. It's where you pay for your food in the winter and then start picking it up once the harvest comes in June. And that gives the farmer financial stability up front to buy the seeds, the fertilization, any equipment repairs that are needed. So it's a great model. If you have a CSA in your area and you like fresh vegetables, I highly recommend you seek one out and subscribe. In addition to the CSA, we do educational programs, much like the beekeeping workshop that we're doing today. We do beekeeping workshops throughout the year. We have another one coming up in October. And next year we're going to repeat all of our series, starting roughly in April, depending upon when the bees are available. And we try to run through the whole, from Beekeeping 101, setting up a hive for the first time, into hive maintenance, hive preparation, and winter closing. So we try to cover the whole spectrum. Being at every workshop myself, it's interesting because everyone comes with different questions, and every time we open up these hives, we see something different. I've been a beekeeper for 3 or 4 years now. I think it's 3 years. 4. In any case, I learned something just at the last workshop that I'd never known before. A laying worker. I'd never heard of it before. I saw it here, and then lo and behold, I went home and opened up one of my hives, and that's what had happened in one of my hives. And I immediately knew what it was because I just learned about it. So even if you've been through these workshops before and think you already kind of covered it, you never know what you'll find at the workshop. So I encourage people to come back and repeat, especially since we offer these for free. We're just finishing our dairy barn, and we're doing educational programming for children. On this side of the dairy barn, you'll see some sunflowers and an arbor. That is our learning garden that we just got established this year, and we'll do programming on gardening for children, adults, people of all ages and abilities. It's a nice, comfortable, easy environment to work in instead of trying to work out in the production field with Farmer Steve. Today we'll be talking about fall preparation. We'll do some sugar rolls and to check for mites, and Richard Moore here has put together some. You want to show what you got in that box there, Richard? These are jars for testing for mites. We'll be demonstrating how to use those. Richard put together a bunch for sale because you can't easily buy them anywhere. So if you'd like to purchase them, speak with Richard, and that way you can go home and check your hives doing a sugar roll, which we'll demonstrate today. Our instructor today, Mr. Mark Wright.
One of the instructors.
One of the instructors. Who are your co-instructors today? We got Steve Dinsmore.
We've got Steve Dinsmore, and we've got Raleigh Hannon, who's a commercial beekeeper here in Connecticut, running a lot of hives. And he's going to start out with going through the hive and doing an inspection and making sure and telling us about what things to look for fall management. And then we'll get into some mite testing, perhaps talk a little bit about varroa mites and other disease processes, and we'll have a good time.
Excellent. Something I also like to do before we get going is to give the instructors an idea of your level of experience. So I'll start with myself. As I said, I think I'm a 3 or 4 year now beekeeper. For some reason I can't remember. I've got 3 hives on my property. Right now 2 of them are doing okay. One has a laying worker, and I've just kind of left it alone just to see what happens. It doesn't seem to be bothering the others in any way. But I hope to learn more today. And let's start over here and work our way that way. So
we're novice. We have 2 hives first year.
Good. Good. All right.
Probably 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7. Okay, we'll come up front.
This is my second year. I've got 2 hives up in Hartford.
All right, a 2 year. All right.
I'm in Gales Ferry up
by the submarine base. I got 2 colonies, put them in the 1st of June. We've been feeding them ever since. And they're real strong, getting ready for the fall flow.
Excellent.
And you came, 2 hives just started.
Just this year?
Yeah, this year.
I'm in Cheshire. I have 5 hives now.
5. How long have you been beekeeping?
A couple years.
Oh, Raleigh. We'll go behind Raleigh.
Yeah. 2nd year, 4 hives.
You 2 are together there.
Yeah.
And we'll come over to
First year, 2 hives.
first year, 2.
Yeah, we're partners in the beekeeping thing, first year.
And it's good to work together. When I started, I actually had sort of a mentor from the Connecticut Beekeepers Association that helped me set up some hives. And it was great to have him come out to my house and help me learn just the basics of getting started. And we have a gentleman all the way behind the camera.
Vernon, 3rd year, just 1 hive.
All right. Fantastic. And Richard, you're
10 hives, 2 properties, about 5 years.
very good. So while Mark is getting some last minute stuff together, if you didn't bring veils, we do have veils available up here on the table. We encourage people to wear long sleeves and long pants when they come up to the apiary. We haven't had too many stings. I think last time it was just the people that were actually working in the hive got 1 or 2 stings. But we've been pretty fortunate that the hives here have been, knock on wood somewhere, very docile. Hopefully it stays that way. The hives back here, all of the yellow ones that are numbered are the research hives, so to speak. We are doing some genetic testing on these hives. These are the ones that we're also going to be inspecting today. The white hives are the Connecticut Beekeepers Association hives, and we don't usually check on those unless we see a big problem and we should get into them. But we'll probably check 3 or 4 hives this morning, and we'll see what we see.
We're going to go over to, what one do you want to run?
Go to the far side so we can work our way back to the yard.
Okay.
I think that's the...
We'll start at those
So
two
that
over
we're
there.
not starting in the middle and then get all worked up. Work on the right-hand side first.
Yeah.
And then we'll work. We'll see how the first hive starts the tone of the day.
They like days like today to sting you. I'm sorry.
A little extra.
Go in the ball.
You notice all of us are standing behind the hive?
On this side. If you have any questions as we're going, I'm going to just open them up, get them promoted.
How full is that super, Raleigh?
2 frames? 2 or 3 frames full.
We're starting to eat it. We got the open on them.
So would you leave it on or take it off?
I would take it off.
Yeah. And then start feeding?
Yeah, I mean the point with feeding is that basically what they got for the rest of the year is what they're gonna what you want to do. But if there's not a lot of honey flow coming in, what you want to do is stimulate the bees to produce a lot of young bees to make it through the winter. Right now is the time that the bees are going to be that's going to last the winter. So they're laid now, they're hatched now. They're a little different than summer bees. They do have fat bodies, which they can store their energy in, and they're a little different. Yeah, they got extra fat bodies in their abdomen that they can store. So during the winter months, they can't get to the honey right away. They have a little bit of energy, whereas summer bees don't have that. So they're just a little different. Also with stimulation, you know, if there is honey flow coming in, you're going to you're just going to let them pack out. We'll see what we got down below.
No, what kind of surf would you start feeding? Or whatever would you start feeding? Heavier surf now at this point? Or
2 to 1.
2 to 1?
1 to 1.
Yeah, I mean,
You start that.
You're gonna feed them.
I mean, mine's a little heavier than one that I'm feeding now, but if you're diligent about it and keep going, I mean, you still got half the month of August, September. I mean, depends on how towards the end of the year you want to get it thicker because they don't have time to dry it.
Yeah.
But if you're using it as a stimulant, you can have it a little light, a little lighter.
So they can build out some.
Yeah, you're not going to really you're going to have to feed a lot to start building comb, and the hives are going to be really strong. And if they're that low on food, the first little bit of syrup's going to be just to get them going.
So you're saying 1 to 1?
Yeah, I mean, if you make it a little heavier, it's not bad. I mean, they got time to dry it. We're talking August, maybe into early September, but after that, I mean, you're going to have to make it thicker because they don't have time to dry. And if we still have a warm fall, it plays. Do we have a warm fall or it gets colder, so.
Or a snowstorm in October.
Yeah. So we got this guy. This is a second frame in. I opened this side because it had less burr comb, so that's why I was working across from me. Some good little, nice looking honey on it. This outside one just is a little bit of honey. Just
When you examine your hive, do you always look at every frame, or do you just take a couple sometimes? And
I don't, only because the quantity I have,
right, okay,
and I'm considered part-time.
right. Well, say somebody has just a couple hives. Do you
Yeah,
recommend they pull on every frame, or?
I don't pull unless you really need to know something. I open them up until I find what I need.
Okay.
So, if we were looking for a queen, okay?
Yeah.
If I come over and I find a bunch of eggs, and it's a nice, and I see cat brood, and it's a nice pattern,
You're done.
I don't need to find
Right.
her. If I'm going into hives and looking for honey, or how much weight they have, if I find it, I'm going to move to the next one. Remember, I'm totally different than you guys. I have 120 hives on pumpkins right now, so. So it's and time is valuable. So I'm not saying due to economics of mine. Then you got here. You got a little bit of 1 or 2 cat brood. Just a couple eggs in the center, just where it's dark.
The next frame's different.
We got the honey. Here we go.
Wow. Good.
Yeah, you also look, there's not even a lot of drones in here. Remember what you're doing, you're just scanning the brood. You're seeing why it's missed, if it's a hygienic trait, if there's a larva laying down, a punch cap, like a hole in the little cap. You're just kind of giving an overview of something's different. You see what the normal larva looks like, and you're just going through and seeing if there's any differences. And that's basically what you're giving them a. Ooh, on this one. There's some really light bees in here too.
Light colored.
Yeah, they're like a Cordovium, which is a recessive redhead Italian. Which that's an oxymoron if I ever heard one.
Italian, I don't know.
So, and you do have one here. You do have some mite syndrome with the crimped wings. If you want to pass that around, it's walking right in the middle. So I mean, you see one I mean, it's not bad, but with only a couple highs, I'd probably start thinking about doing something. Because it, you know, you guys have more time than we do, so. And if I lose a couple, it's not a big deal. Whereas you lose a couple, you could be out of the bee business.
Is everyone taking a look that wants to see? Come on, step up.
What if when you opened up that...
We're looking at the deformed wings.
Some swarm cells on the
See that?
Yeah. Okay.
What would you do? Would you make a split?
Probably not this time of year. You would see why she's leaving, okay? You would see what's going on.
Yeah.
Usually her pattern's affected. Here's another one too.
Oops. And obviously it can't fly.
A couple of wings look like they got, they're holding back on it. You basically look how the bees work. I saw one drone. There was just one.
Now, were you also looking at resources in the hive as we start to march towards?
I'm keep going. Like, we still got a couple frames of honey. Let's see this guy. And I always stop. It's pretty bad. I always stop to see a bee emerge because those are the ones that you can see really. You can see it's not really scattered all over it. So, and it's nice because these bees just hatched, and they're already putting in eggs back in it.
This one had a sugar.
Huh?
The workshop, this one had a sugar.
Anyone else?
Oh yeah, yep, right on it. Ooh.
And when you find a cell that you don't like, you just.
What's your criteria for a cell you don't like?
What you like about it?
It was open and the larva was brown.
Oh.
You got a stick?
Makes sense
Oh,
that we have this problem now.
Right.
Right there.
Personally, I've been trying to go out every 2 weeks to sugar my hives.
We did every 4 days,
Yeah.
4 times.
To get the countdown.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
It's not always possible.
Another
If it
French
rains.
wing.
Yep.
Everybody see the queen that wants to see her?
I want to see.
Was any honey taken off these hives at all that you know of? Or?
No, we haven't taken anything from the hives this year.
So there's just the one super box. Okay.
Right. There is another. The hive is right next to this one.
Has two.
Has two.
Yeah,
and
I mean it could.
generally been stronger this year.
I mean it could be that.
Did you want to step up with the camera?
Find the queen and point her out with your finger there, Raleigh.
Or smile. Say honey.
She's the big long she's the longer one of all of them swarming around there.
Is she marked?
Nope, none of our queens have been marked. Makes it a little harder to find her.
Yeah, but when you find her, this is the time to.
Yeah.
Nah, try to find the big black carniolan queen that's not marked. Then you'll have a field day. The Italians are pretty easy. You want from up top or you want from the bottom?
Yeah, as long as it's a food frame.
Without the queen, right?
You get 2 frames to choose from. Or you want the queen frame too?
Yeah, no, I want the frame.
You want to shake it?
So what I do typically is after we've located the queen, what I'll do is I've got a little plastic Tupperware bucket that I use, and I'll shake the bees in, and it's a big swarmy mess, and then I'll knock them, and then I have a container, and we'll throw them in. It's a little sharp, but and then what we'll do is I've already put the powdered sugar inside, and we're going to start powdering them up.
Mark, you want to describe the reasons why you were doing the powdered sugar?
Well, the reason why we're, first of all, what we want to try to do is determine what the mite level is of this particular hive. So one way that we can do it is by using, without killing the bees, is to put some powdered sugar on the bee. And what it'll do is it'll loosen itself. The mite will loosen itself from the bee. It's got these little suction cups on the end of it, and this powdered sugar will help dislodge them. And so we'll shake it up. And they say that you should shake them up for about 10 minutes. And then typically what I'll do is I'll take a paper plate and I'll shake them onto a paper plate. But because we often have a difficult time seeing those small mites, I saw this technique the other day that I'm going to try here today, where I put some water in this pan, and I'm going to shake the mites and powder into the pan, hoping that the sugar is going to dissolve really quick and the mites will float to the top, so that we can more readily see them instead of trying to pick through the sugar on the plate.
How much sugar do you have in there?
The instructions are on the thing, but it's about 2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons? And a cup of bees?
And a cup of bees, which is around 300 bees.
Okay.
A half a cup of bees, I'm sorry.
Half a cup of bees.
Okay. And there are 3 ways to monitor, generally, for a mite load. One is through using a sticky board.
Right.
Which is a board that looks like this, that you would put in the bottom of your hive. And then you would let the mites drop, and after 3 days you would count the number of mites on this board, divide by 3. Some recent information that we just received, a couple of us were at EAS in Vermont this year. We just drove back late last night. And what they're doing in Canada is they're leaving this board in there for 7 days and then monitoring the mite load that way. And from their studies, their studies conclude that the best way to measure mites is with the sticky board. They don't believe that much in the powder method or the alcohol roll. So this is a sugar shake, by the way. You can see that I'm shaking the bees in the powder, and then I'm going to attempt to shake them. Now there's a sticky pad. There's a cover on that sticky board. You wouldn't want to peel that off before you slid it underneath the hive. I don't think it's been quite 10 minutes yet, has it? So you get your arm muscles up by doing this. You can get your exercise and your workout program at the same time.
Now there's some talk about the difference, the long duration natural mite drop piece has to coincide some way with the brood cycle. So for instance, if the brood was high for some reason in there doing a long-term mite drop, you could probably get as good results with the sugar shake. Everything's theoretical. There's nothing that's good.
Right. If you're later into your year when you have no brood,
right, then you can. And this is just fine.
And obviously, we haven't talked that much about mite dynamics, but as your bee population increases, your mite population increases dramatically also. So you're going to expect to find more mites this time of year than you would earlier in the spring. So let's see if this works. I'll give it a nice little shake. And people like this method because when we're done, we're just going to roll the bees back into the hive. And I don't think you need to be, I think you can see the mites. Yeah. So you can come up and look at that. They're just floating right on the top now. I mean, we kind of already guessed that this mite load was going to be a little bit high.
3 per 100.
When you can start seeing the mites on the bees, that's a pretty good indicator. And then what everyone likes is the poor bees,
You have a concussion.
go home, go see mama.
Ghost bees.
And then you'll see ghost bees. I mean, what I would do right now is would already have been set up for this. I would have probably waited till I was in the second box and then work up. And once I saw these mite level loads, I probably already would have had my duster out, and I would have already been dusting them. because I use powdered sugar dusting as one of my mite treatments. And if I have high mite loads, what I'll do is I'll do this for 3 weeks in a row, like every Sunday, and then I would measure my mite load again and see where we're at.
Where do the mites come from?
Where do they come from? Asia. Probably Asia. Now there's a lot of drifting amongst the hives with the worker bees and the drones. So this hive could be relatively free. When you come back in a week, it might have picked up some mites from some of the drifting that occurs in the bee yard. And that's another thing that we were talking about in one of yesterday's lectures.
Especially with the way the wind blows. If it's always on the downwind side of it, you got them all in the row, they're all the same color, then you see more to drift. So they come back into a yard that they're about ready to land in their hive, and they get a big wind blow, and the next thing you know, they're in front of another one, and they come in.
So if anyone hasn't seen what a mite looks like, you really need to come up and take a look at it and plant it in your memory, because you really want to be able to identify these guys. So feel free to step up and stick your finger in. And what's that?
How many did you end up with?
There's at least 8.
At least 8.
And I think I was a little short on the count too. I don't think I had exactly a half a cup. I was a little light.
You were a quarter and a half.
Yeah.
You're a quarter. So the reason why I closed this up too is you can see the bees were starting to get a little antsy. The other hives were coming over, checking them out. I had a couple yellow jackets in there, so.
Well, what we one of the things that we have here is what we call, I call this a screen inner cover. I think that's probably how they market it, as a screen inner cover or a top screen. And you would put this underneath your telescoping cover, and you could use that to increase your ventilation in the dog days of July. You could also use this to help you when you do your powdered sugar treatments. You can take your sugar and put it on the screen, and then take your brush and work it through the mesh as it drops into the hive. And then you would take that off, and with your brush, take all the sugar that's on the top of the comb and put that in between.
And we can actually we can do a demonstration. We got lots of powdered sugar.
You want to do that on the next one? We'll do the powdered sugar on the next hive, because I think we're done with this one, right? The other thing that you can use this for is a screen. If you work in your hive and you don't want the bees buzzing up at you, just advance it back and forth.
I run it completely
as you pull the hives out.
This one, since there's only like, let's see, a deep frame of honey is about 8 pounds. So there is probably 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 frames of honey in this. In the top box, there's probably nothing in the bottom box. So I would pull super off, dust them, start feeding. Because remember, we got to start feeding now. We just can't be in another month or 6 weeks from now going, oh, they didn't get any goldenrod honey. Well, hate to say it, but we don't really make too much goldenrod anymore, and everybody's banking on it. I kind of gave up on it. It's just if they're going to use it, they're going to fatten themselves up on it, but I haven't made it in a long time. I got some big fields in New York that I have on, and they just seem not to pan out. There's always something that's going wrong with it. So I just come in and start feeding. I probably, this one a little bit of spotty pattern. I might hit them with Fumigelin just to square up on the Nosema for winter, just because we're going to go into winter. We have a couple doses now, and let's get them on the right foot, you know, get them so that they don't have any problems, you know. Remember, we treat them now for Nosema, they're going to look better, they're going to survive the winter better because they're not stressed, they're going to have baby bees, if they're passing that disease on to the young stock, because remember, it's regurgitated out their mouth parts, so they could pass it by that, even though it's a gut disease. The spores are around in the hive, so let's get them a clean environment to go in the winter with.
Probably would you give them patties as well?
I mean,
On this one.
I'm a big fan of pollen patties. It's good nutrition. if they use it, they use it. They're still sucking them down. They're still chewing up the patties. I got some that are using patties. I have some nukes that I'm trying to beef up, and those are still getting patties now, and they're chewing them up. I mean, 1 to 2 pounds. I shipped everything in the pumpkins with 3 to 4 pounds of patties on it, and they were gone in 3 weeks. So, and that was a month ago. So, it's a little added expense, but if the pollen's a little short, you can buy the pollen substitutes are really good. And we're not like we're trying to stimulate, but if you get a good hatch, you do the best you can for your bees right now, because, like we said before, these bees are going to last you the winter. Treat them for fumigellin, give them a pollen patty, make sure they got food on. I'd start feeding this guy right off the bat, because basically when you're done, you want this box full. That's going to be about 60 pounds of honey. And then you want basically all your brood and everything in the bottom box. And that's going to give you your best shot for winter, because it's hard to go through and feed in the wintertime when it's cold outside and you're trying to disturb them.
So would you manipulate frames in order to achieve that, to have all your honey on the top box? Or would you just leave them however they left it?
I would... She's going to want... I would leave them as is, start feeding them and see what they do. Because what happens is if we start to move all our brood down to the bottom box, but the whole bottom box is empty. So we move the queen and everything down, and now we're feeding them, she's going to move upstairs and starts laying. That's going to put us another 21 days from the time she lays an egg before that comb's available. So we already have cat brood here. Let's start feeding them and start pushing her down. If you had a queen excluder, you could queen exclude the double boxes, put all the brood down below, leave some empties up top, and then just start feeding them. You could do it that way too, if you had a queen excluder. Make sure she's on the bottom box, put all your brood down there, and then when you start feeding, then they'll take it, put it up top, and once in a while you get a queen excluder that's bent. It's just the way it is. I mean, you'll have one that decides to sneak through it, but get all the brood down below. Might be easier for your mite treatment too. They're all down there. Then you have the empty combs on top with the, put your empties in the middle, your honey on the outside, so they like to fill the middle, and just keep feeding them. And that would be a way with a queen excluder to do that. And then you're not, when you come in and check, you're not worrying about, oh, is the queen going to get out of there in time, and can I push her down? This way she's already on the bottom board, and
you get a whole box of honey on top.
Yeah, you can. She's not fighting it. Even if there's no eggs and it's just solid cat brood, and you say you got a problem where you have 10 frames or 11 frames of brood between these two boxes combined. Well, you kind of really don't want to put your 2 frames of brood on the outside wall, so you still leave that honey. You stick your 8 frames of open brood in larvae in the middle, and then say you had a couple frames of cat brood. Just stick them on top, because those are going to hatch within a few days. They'll come out, the frame will be empty, and then as you're feeding, they'll fill those cells, and then the ones in the bottom, you'll have all the larvae growing out, capping, and then they'll cycle that way. This way, give you some comb space.
So what we need here, just to recap quickly, is that we need to put some honey or some feed into this box so that they can have at least a full drawn-out box of sugar or honey, and some combs on the bottom so they can overwinter. And the other topic we had was, are the bees healthy? And we talked about monitoring the mite loads. Remember, the mites are a vector, and they vector viral load, which is the deformed wing virus that we were looking at. So we want to decrease the viral load by decreasing the mites. And then Raleigh had mentioned about this nosema, this gut disease, and that's an important one to stay on top of also, because that steals the energy and the vitality from the bee. I'm not going to get into the biology of Nosema ceranae, but basically it steals the energy and the sugar from the bee. And that's why you want to keep that under control, because you want your bees, these bees that are going to grow now, last you that 6 months through the winter, you want them to be as healthy as possible and as fat as possible. And I like the idea of putting the pollen patty on there. Fat bees are happy bees. And there's some recent studies that showed that the protein content of the pollen patties that we have could be a lot higher, and we would gain a better health benefit from that. And that's some ongoing research that we'll see more about. So fat bees, happy bees, and healthy bees with good food reserves will get you through the winter.
So I'm going to take a look at number 7.
And I really got into pollen patties a couple years ago. I was talking to some friends that, good friends of mine that work migratory. They were telling me, he goes, we got 30 pounds of pollen and we fed these bees this year, per hive. I was like, 30 pounds? He goes, yeah, it was expensive, but he's like, the bees look good. I mean, so they're always on. He said, when he shipped them to Maine out of Pennsylvania for apples, they got 8 pounds of pollen patty to go to Maine for blueberries. Now, we're also extreme because they're picking them up and moving them all the time, but I noticed it this summer. I started, I have a queen bank, and they were chewing up a pollen. It's a queenless colony that I used to hold in mated queens or virgins, depends on the time of year. And they were chewing up a pollen patty once a week, a pound patty every week. Some were even less. So as soon as they got low, they got another one. So sometimes they had if they were half gone, I just throw another one in. So I mean, they really chewed it up. I was amazed at how fast they did.
To the last information that I saw, and it surprised me, a normal healthy hive consumes 2 to 3 pounds of pollen per week. Per week. That's a lot of pollen. So that was a number that made me stand up and take notice. And you're looking at about a half a gallon of syrup or honey per week also as natural consumption, just to keep everyone alive and happy.
Notice the difference already? Four partial frames.
And so one of the questions when you're opening up a hive like that and you're looking at that super, I mean, you can look right in that super relatively quickly to see if they're even working, that guy. And obviously, just by touching that, you can see that that one is almost not being worked at all. Then when you get down into this one, you know, you can see that there's some activity, but
I just saw some open, so out of curiosity, I go in and see if there's actually brood in there. There's just 2 drones on the bottom. We got 6 drones over here.
How is that one in terms of honey?
7. We got those two with the open centers. Huh? Mine's just, I could tell when my smoker gets low.
Yeah, it's burning hot.
No, and when I start, the plug goes.
when we talk about smoker's fuel, by the way, one of the things that I've seen a lot with new beekeepers, when I always ask them, you know, start up your smoker for me. And when I see them rummaging the yard for leaves, the newspaper, and twigs and sticks, that's probably not the type of smoke that you want to create for your bees. You know, you don't want to take the Sunday newspaper and ball that up and put it in your smoker. I'm not sure what the paper, which is recycled paper, who knows what's in it, and the ink. I'm not so sure what happens to that ink once you light it up and start burning it. It's like a cigarette. The end of a cigarette is a chemical factory once you light that tobacco. So I like to carry a 5-pound bucket myself. I notice that some people just use the twine, which is great, as long as it's not treated. And I just use a bucket that has a mixture of pine needle, pine cones, sawdust shavings, and I harvest my Christmas tree. So I let it dry out, and then I break it all up and put it into chunks. I put it into a 5-gallon bucket like that with a plastic bag. It keeps it nice and dry.
Could you write down that formula for us?
I use balance twine because it's cheap and easy.
Yep.
It was fun to use pine needles down south, but there's a lot more pines there is here, and being that I'm a part-time beekeeper, time is limited and we don't have a lot of pines, at least where my house is. So, and the part about like mine is it fits in a 5-gallon pail. You can throw a lid on it, throw it in the back of the truck, and if you run it over, you can get another pail. And
I like pine needles as well, but part of it is the time to rake them up, and a lot of times you got to let them dry. You got to take them, lay them out on the garage floor, and let them dry or something. Or if you dry in a big bucket.
What do you notice on that frame? Anything else? Bees. The wood, plastic insert.
Genius. You're a genius.
Notice anything else? No. Look at the pollen. Notice something different about it? No, that's always. They always, when they ever store pollen, they only fill it 80%, and then they cap it off with honey to preserve it, and then they put the wax cap on it. Notice how it's a little wet? When you start getting experience, we haven't looked in. That's the first frame we pulled. That catches my attention. More times out of 10, you find the hives queenless. Especially in the spring and the summer. If you start looking for wet pollen, they're not using it.
So how do you identify wet pollen versus pollen that's got a little bit of honey on it?
Look at the sheen to it.
Yeah.
See how it's glossy?
Yeah.
Like it's usually dry. I mean, you could tell if they're just starting to put it, but you'll see a lot of very scattered pollen, and they're not really using it because there's no need to, because they're not raising bees off of it. And I just brought it up as a pointer. I don't know what the hive looks. I see larvae here, but it's a good teaching tool for when you're home. Because especially in the spring or something, it's just, you see them, they're scattered. Especially on this side, there's like one here, one there. There's nothing. And when you come across it more or less, that's what you see with a queenless colony. The bees will be more agitated, running around more than they are now, but it was just a good teaching. And you'll even get the pollen even wetter than that. It's just... Anybody else want to look?
So did you say that they typically put the pollen to about 80% of the cell?
Yeah, 80% of the cell when they'll cap it with honey, because honey is a good preserver. And that keeps it from the quality of the pollen from actually deteriorating.
But in this case, the pollen is way down in the cell.
No, it's up, but there's so much of it that's open.
And wet?
Yeah, so you're like, and usually when I've seen it, when you work a lot of hives, and I'm looking at brood here, so when you normally see it in your colony, you'll start seeing that. You won't see a lot of bees. There is a lot of bees, but I just try to bring it up as a pointer for maybe next year, or if you go home and say, well, something's not acting right. They're a little more, they're skittish, they're running around a little bit more, and you see that, you'll...
In this case, they may just not be using that frame of honey.
Yeah, but you just kind of give a, what's going on? Did she stop?
Yep.
Now we're starting to get some eggs and larvae, so. But I just brought it up to just look at it, see what's different. Usually pollen doesn't look like that, but it was just to train your eye. So when you start going through hives, you can start picking stuff up.
Yep.
We got a bunch of eggs. There's a mite. You know there's something different about this hive too? All their honey's in the top 2 boxes. So if you were to pull this honey right now, this honey now, which happens, and it rains for a couple days, yeah, you'd starve these guys in a heartbeat. Remember, the first brood they kill when there's no honey in there is drone, and then they'll actually start taking out the workers. You got a little frame here, but that's really nothing. A little 2-inch here. But I mean, we got honey in the top box, but that's about it. Decent pattern. You might have some white. Oh, you got some. Yeah, here you go. You want this one? Open. Look at this. There's open workers. There's not chalk brood, but they're all shriveled up in there.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, they say if you have a soft white plug like that, that's not hard, then that's the form wing virus.
Would you say that again? What did you say about
When you look at those little white plugs that are in there and they're soft and gooey, what chalk brood is hard?
Yeah.
And,
so these that are not
open.
capped might...
No, they were capped at one point. They're open. They chewed them open.
Oh.
Because they're all developed. They're starting to develop. That's why.
So those are most likely have deformed wings.
Steve, a piece of stick.
You had a big spider on you.
Actually, or a piece of. Give me a piece of foxtail. That's mine. I just need a hard stem.
So can I see this? Is it okay?
So is that also an indication of an individual going on?
Yeah, it could be. So you're going to try to see what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, see? I just pulled this one out and a mite crawled out of it. And you can see residue in the bottom. And it's actually, it went in the other open cell right next to it. Really quick. So it's on the end of the pointer. So that could have
Out of the way so the rest of you can see it.
This is one that was all dried up. I'll just pull it out to see what it would look like.
Raleigh, have you noticed any deformed wings in this box yet?
Yeah.
Look at the EAS there saying that when you got crawled out of that cell and into the other one,
Yeah.
will not reproduce.
It was a mature one though. Oh. Yeah. Won't lay this time, we'll get them the next time. And you can see this one, I mean, you can see that the larva is almost matured. The worker has like formed eyes. And there's his mouth parts and everything else. So you can see that, you know, what's going on. So it's not just like it's a big sea larva on the bottom, it's almost fully matured. And it died. So they must have sensed that it had mites in there, so it's going through. So shake them or you want to? Here, hold this. Here, hold this one. I'll grab the next one too. Sometimes they do. Not all the time. You can take both these frames if you want. Can I shake them both? Sure. There you go. Yep. Also, too, while you're doing this, as we mentioned before about going through and moving like combs of frames with brood down. Look at the comb.
If you feed them with sugar water, it puts the honey
I mean, it's gonna. It'll be lighter. You'll still have some of the stuff back, but you're not gonna really harvesting it. You're just using it for them for the winter. You know.
To exclude movement of bees in and out. What you're mentioning is this.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't know.
Not all of them have these spacers on them. And in the summertime, what I do is I put the screens on the top that had added ventilation, but I don't want all the bees in the neighborhood to come and rob. So I like the fact that it's enclosed. You know, when you turn it.
Now, do you take the top board off and just substitute that during the summer?
Yeah, I wouldn't have the inner cover on. No. I don't have the inner cover on. Right now, all my hives don't have an inner cover. They just have a screen, and it's tilted up, and it's a little bit. I pop it open a little bit. But that's what, that's the nice thing about beekeeping. It's a science. No one thing is the answer. You each need to develop your own management style. What works for you? What works at your home in your area? Don't be afraid to try different things. And the other thing too is always use science to help guide you. I'm not an advocate of just treating hives. Obviously, if you have 500 hives, you're not going to go through and test every hive for nosema before you decide to treat. But for the smaller scale person, let science be your guide. Do your mite levels and then treat according to your mite levels. And we have been sponsoring, for example, nosema workshops at the Ag Station. And so our goal is to have each club trained, several people trained in each club to do the nosema screening of the hives. And we did our first workshop about a month ago, and we had 15 participants. We're going to do the same thing with the Connecticut Beekeeping Association. Ted was in the process of buying 2 microscopes for the club, and we'll also sponsor another workshop. And, we're kind of hoping that at some point in the future, perhaps if you come to a bee meeting, you can bring your little baggie of bees and someone can check them for you. Something like that.
One reason for using a screen when you dust, keep the bees in, because dusting really pisses off.
It really makes them mad.
It's for your protection. You could take a sifter and go around, but this is much more. It spreads it out a lot more evenly, and it keeps them from coming up and getting you.
You want to get a brush? I got a cup. I mean, I've done this way too, and the other thing I like is a flour sifter, and I put a cup of flour and I just go across, and I usually stay inboard about 4 inches, and then I dust the top of the comb up.
You want to make sure the screws are up so that you're not leaving a gap around the edge.
Now the other thing that you could do prior to doing this is make sure you have a board down and below your, I think there's screens on here, yeah. Make sure your board is cleaned off down underneath. So then after about 20 minutes you can pull that board and look at your mite level, see what your mite drop was.
Mark, when you keep that board in and you let the powder sugar drop after 20 minutes, what do you think about putting it into a pan of water similar to what we're doing?
I think I haven't done that, but I'm kind of liking that idea. Huh? I've not done that. I just saw this the other day, and I'm like, wow, I wish I had thought of that. The mites really pronounced when you put them in that water.
It's also kind of neat about this. In a few minutes, you'll start seeing ghost bees coming out the front entrance.
The other thing, too, is if you do have your monitoring tray underneath after you do the powdering, take that tray out and brush off that tray and dispose of it properly. Don't let it stay in the bee yard. Don't let it accumulate underneath the hive, because the ants really like the sugar. And when you put an hors d'oeuvre on the sugar, i.e. mites, you'll get a lot of ants.
You're only dusting once for both boxes? Do you normally do the bottom box and then do the top box? Or you just go with one?
If you don't have much food down below, it just makes sense to dust below.
Yeah, so if you have a lot of brood, you could do each box, or you can just do the top brood box. Andy Oliver shows both ways. Have we got 10 minutes on that, Shaker?
I think it's pretty close to it.
You can do the honors.
So you would not sugar the mediums or the small super the top?
You know, I don't like putting sugar in my supers. It always seems to get caught up in that.
They're pretty sweet.
Oh, you can zoom from here. We're getting some falling out.
Yeah, the sugar's not.
Would it, in this case, with what we're doing here, would it make more sense to put, bee escapes on these boxes before we did this and get the whole population of bees in these bees?
Yeah. Like if you were doing it not for a teaching thing, and
just for your.
I'd harvest everything. You push them all down, either bee escapes or fume boards.
Yeah.
Get them all down and then hit them.
Your mite's coming out though, huh?
Especially with knowing that you got a back feed, so.
Because there's like lots of phoretic mites in those boxes, right? Just wondering, is that my thinking correct?
Not too much. Most of the mites are going to be around the brood, so you're going to deal with the nurse bees. I mean, there'll be some stragglers hanging on the bees running around the hive, but you figure they like to hang out at the buffet, is what I like to call it, you know. So they won't travel too far unless you got that. If you got that serious of a mite load. Well, I mean, you'll still get some, but majority they're going to be around where the brood is because it smells. And they pick up on the pheromones of the brood.
Okay, anyone want to count?
If you're going to dust, you got to do it like 3 times in 10-day periods.
And put the lid back on, or?
Yeah.
I was gonna.
You want to put the other two in?
Close them up. Yeah, let's close them up. I was gonna put that powder in between the frames.
Normally you would have brushed that sugar
Normally
down.
you want to brush that sugar down in between the combs.
That's also the idea of this green. That should help a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's another one with the you get a good nest around here someplace. You can find it.
The yellow jacket. Yeah.
This is a really good way to visualize them, though. I'm liking that. You could really see what they look like.
What do we got for a count?
Here's, what did you count? 11? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. See what's neat about one of these is it's almost translucent. Right here.
Yeah, they're really ready.
That perhaps could be a male mite, but probably just a young one.
It's got enough. Anyway.
It's got enough. Yeah.
It's like 13 or 14 or something.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
This one you had
More bees on it.
probably the whole 300 bees, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. This was a goodly amount. Yeah. And the powder was, you want to keep, when you do this, you want to make sure that your powder stays nice and dry. And that powder was had a little moisture in it, so it wasn't as powdery as it should be.
It's hard to do it on a humid day.
Yeah, it's a nice humid day too. So I try to keep everything in this, I try to keep this bucket full, and I try to keep the lid closed, and I have my little cup measuring tool in here. And I don't like the plastic bags unless you can flip them.
So I think we got time for one more hive inspection. We could take a look at one that is not doing so well, or maybe even completely dead.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. What do we do to this one?
It's like somebody tried to re-clean this. Looks like this was a nuke from Dave Mendes.
Yeah.
Nothing going on up top. It was a.
So the first thing we do is just look inside the hive. Just look inside the frames. Come up and take a look and see what you see for activity. What's going on in there?
Nobody's ever seen it. What a queen cup looks like in production. Just when you raise your own queen cells, put it in one of these.
Proven wrong.
Now, if you wanted to play, I mean, there's certain things that you could play. Put a jar on it. Literally put, or go to a hive that you have handfuls of honey, and pull a frame of honey on it that's capped. Take your hive tool, scrape it all up, put it in the middle of these guys. And come back in a couple days, put a pollen patty on, and if you want to see if the queen's laying, you'll start taking that honey and you'll see a lot of honey getting chewed up. And they'll actually use it. Bees will come back again. I probably wouldn't. You wouldn't have it. There's no honey in there. I take the near starvation. That's the first thing I would drop is. I mean, you got that many eggs, if you're still wanting to lay and there's no food in there, this is definitely one you put the sugar to. You might want to knock it down to one box. You could even do a nuke. If you got a nuke box, and just put the feed as fast as you can to it.
Don't let them run out of food. Give them protein.
And give them some protein. Because look, there's no, you see these, there's no pollen, there's no honey. So if you had a hive that's going real strong, I would go grab a frame of honey and a frame with pollen on it, and like immediately go put it in there. Scratch them off. That's one of the do not pass go.
So you're scratching up the honey so just so they don't have to take it down.
Yeah, and if it drips on them, they can smell it, they just run right to it. Go in the bottom of that frame. No, they're not going to be too many drones.
So that's the other thing you've got to look at. There are no drones.
I mean, the drones are the first brood that goes.
Because they're starving.
Yeah, they're on the verge of starving. Literally, like 2 days from now, if we had a couple days of rain, these guys would be all dead. There's nothing for it. There's no food for it, no resource. And that's the thing. Once you start getting the lack of resource, that's why we say feed this time of year. Because if you were trying to wait on this one,
So reduce your entrance so, because it's a weak colony, you want robbers from other counties coming and taking what you're giving them. So you look at the frame of honey.
All honey. Give them something to
something to eat so they don't starve in the next couple of days. But, get some feed on it right away. In fact, one of the
Do they use those feeding jar covers here? Do they have side feeders?
Feed jars, either way. This time of year you can get away with front feeding, but I always like top feeding over intercover. I have a hive like this at home. It's going to be a challenge hive to deal with.
But,
I caught a squirm.
So we talked about
2 weeks ago.
We talked about drip and about sharing parasites. Obviously, we know that we had mites in that other hive, right? So there's probably mites on this. However, what we're going to attempt to do is do a little rescue mission. So one of the critical things that they're going to need is nurse bees. So these are going to hatch out soon. So we're going to put this frame in here also, along with some honey.
I'm putting it right next to the brood here because these bees are going to take care of this brood. But I'm also looking for them to actually to have something to eat without having to go too far off.
Now because when we didn't take the young bees off the closed brood, and they're going to be accepted in the hive. So when you move a frame like that, you want to move the frame in its entirety with all the bees in there. You don't want to shake any of them off. But remember,
Sure you don't have a queen in.
make sure that you're not moving the queen. Typically what I do is when I go to a hive, especially when I'm doing inspections of other people's hives, I have a queen catcher in my pocket. As soon as I identify the queen, I capture her. And then I hand it off to the owner. And that's your responsibility. And then we can go through the hive with a little more relaxed or a little more aggression.
Now, if you can feed this,
I like using gallon jugs.
actually, I might have to take this, just go put it right on top. Take a deep super, put it on top, put your cover right over it. It's the easiest way to do it. It's direct to the bees. And if it's rainy outside, you don't have to come around to get an external feeder.
With this being a weak hive, you want to block that entrance so you don't have everybody else coming around to zero.
Right. That's not a bad thing.
Can you just summarize that configuration again, like what you did there?
What I did is we figured that the bees are used to some frames, but we introduced a frame of brood. So there was cat brood, a lot of cat brood, but there was still young brood. So they need feed. So I put a frame of honey next to them. So the bee can walk from this frame to this frame without having to go through with the big colony. Because, you know, some nights they're still getting cooler now, and they need everything as tight as possible, okay? Notice where I put this. Where I put... Yeah. We do that so that the syrup's right there. They have nowhere to travel. Because you figure it's a small colony, they're going to need all the energy they can to just make it through. So you got here, and now you got the hole here, and you got the brood sitting here. So, since these guys are starving, cool, you got a lot of holes open. They're going like that. Now if you wanted, you could just take a normal piece of plywood, cut a bunch of holes in it, go for the 2 3/4 inch, oh, there you go. The 2 3/4 inch hole, and yeah. And then if you wanted, you could put a high body around it just to keep it from So, put a few holes in it so that, you know, you're going to get the syrup out of quick. It's different when you're trying to stimulate them versus when they have nothing. So if you feed by this, if you have 1 or 2 holes in it, and it's a slow trickle, it simulates a honey flow that you want the jar to last over a couple days. which is fine, but these guys might not have a couple days. So you put a bunch of holes in the lid, so the amount of syrup they can have access to is right there.
You know, when you use these jars time and time again, they will propolize those salt holes. So when you go back to use them later, pull it up to the light, make sure the holes are open.
Just get a piece of little piece of square stock or a handle off a tool, put a nail in it, drive the nail in, put it on the grinder, make a point, and then just sit there and pop them.
Now, when you, I just wanted you to remember one thing when we talk about feeding bees, you want to feed in gallons. This is a tease. Especially like that hive over there, thinking gallons.
Other than just glass jars, you can also use have brand new paint cans.
Yes.
That's the fast way to do it. You just pop the can, fill it up, invert it. Same thing with the holes.
I went to the paint store in Middletown there, right along Route 9, and we got like half a dozen of those stainless steel cans. That's where they were used.
And you can get in there.
You'll pay a bit more. Do we have a deep shallow, a deep shell?
Put that rock on it or that holds up the...
No, with sugar water.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, they drill the holes in the side of the and make it like an open up either. That's another. What we were talking about is another way is you can get a 5-gallon bucket and fill it up full of your feed, and then drill holes around the lip, and then invert it and put it there, and you can put a lot of feed out really quickly. Yeah, it's like 60 pounds.
Like a barrel feeder. And just put it off that area, not in the bee yard. Put it off a little bit, and they'll find it, and they'll come suck it down and take it back.
Other people use chicken feeders, the glass chicken feeders, like a 2-gallon jar.
Quail feeders.
Yeah, quail feeders. Yeah.
And you can do that. You can do that on top through your lid too. Some people put this, put a quail feeder, and then put the box back on. So.
Questions?
This one wouldn't be bad if you went through everything and you found that everybody was like the 3 we found today that needed feed. If you didn't want to go into each hive and do in jars, you could actually set up with a couple 5-gallon pails off at a little distance, let them come rob it and bring it back. I mean, you'll stimulate the other guys, but you would still want to put a jar on your really weak one, especially this guy. So you could mass feed everybody in the yard without having to go fill up jars every day.
So for other than sugar, when you're actually going to do a mite treatment, take your honey supers off.
There are different chemicals with different protocols.
Well,
they have a new chemical out that you can treat with the super on.
Right, that's
the Mite Away pads. Yep.
Yeah. Now, I've also heard
and that's that's a 7-day treatment.
Okay. Now I've heard that can affect your queen.
Yes. Some study has indicated that when you put that much formic acid in right away, it could affect the queen and the brood.
So if you're doing the apicard, no super. But what time should it be start now, or what is because you've got nectar right
when your question leads us to another conversation about the calendar.
Right. It changed this year.
The calendar is thrown out the window this year because of the year that we've had.
Right.
The answer is you're monitoring your mite load. The mite load will tell you when you need to treat or how many times. In Canada, they're treating 3 times a year. 3 different times. And the last one is, I believe, was in November. So let your mite load tell you when you're going to treat.
If you're just using dusting, that's something you can just do every couple of weeks.
Yeah. What I do, my first cut, this is just what I do. My first cut is if my mite loads are high, I'm going to use the dusting, powder sugar dusting, 3 weeks in a row, every Sunday. Boom, 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 each box, a cup. Then I'll monitor them again. And if the levels are still high, then I'm going to consider something else. and there's a bunch of literature out there, and I'm not going to recommend a particular chemical or treatment, but there are a lot out there, and I really like Randy Oliver's website, scientificbeekeeping.com. He's got some good ideas out there, and the last time I used the pads, I have come to understand that we're not going to eliminate the mite. The mite is going to be with us for a long time, so we have to live with the mite. So when I use these pads that we talked about, the Mite Away formic acid pads, I don't use 2 of them because of the reason that you just mentioned. I use 1 pad. I'm happy with a 45% or a 50% knockdown.
And you're selecting for stronger mites.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Right. Based on what you heard in Canada about the long
I'm thinking about changing over and trying the 7-day sampling. Did you? How'd you do?
Well, I'm not finding a lot of support for the results because there's a lot of use for the sugar. I couldn't figure out. I mean, I got some mite drops that were high, some were low.
And they're going to be higher later into the year. That's okay.
But I was trying to establish a baseline.
Yes. Yep. And you mentioned a keyword, a baseline. Take records. Make notes of your hives. If you have, 500 hives, you're not going to be able to do that. But for many of us, when you have 20, 30, 15, and 4 hives, you can do that. Keep a record. Because you're not going to remember. I'm telling you, I can't remember. So I do about 30 hives. I thought I could, but I can't.
We're going to wrap it up. Any final questions? Mark in the room here?
Thanks for coming out. Be sure to take a magazine.
Thank you. And if you haven't signed in, make sure you put your name on the sign-up sheet up there.